I'm here to show you how to pass the test. I'm not here to teach you every little thing because there's not enough time to do that. That's the biggest mistake that I realized when I was a student going to different courses is that I want the magic pill. There is no magic pill. They're teaching me everything that I should have learned in med school, okay, or review, but then how do I pass the test? So I hope you realize the USMLE organization, the questions are structured very differently than med school. So with questions that I highlight each and every session, the links that I create are provided to you in the online community. So I would suggest if you want to know how to pass and want to pass this test, I would buckle down, get Amboss, work with Amboss, and then solidify later with UWorld. If your time is limited, stick with what you got. Don't want to change a platform on you last minute, right? But if you want to pass a test and you want to work on your weaknesses, you have to use certain resources that I suggest because I know what works and what doesn't, okay? So today we're doing cardio. Think about what cardio means to you, okay? I'd like for you to participate. You can put stuff in the chat box. You could write anything your heart desires. I want to know from you all if you're strong in cardio, yes and no, or you don't have to answer a rhetorical question. Then I want you to ask yourself, where in cardio, and feel free to put it in the chat here, where in cardiology do you think and do you feel you can get questions right? I mean, because it's a point system, right? You got to go hunting. So I'm like, well, if you're studying for a board exam, are you honestly going to spend 3-4 weeks reviewing videos in cardio? If you do, that's great. But then those 3 weeks that you spend on cardio, you better be working on what you've done before with micro, biochem, immuno, or anything you've covered because you're going to forget stuff, right? So it's a fine line for USMLE prep. You can't spend too much time. You can't spend minimum amount of time. So I want to know from you guys, where do you think you'll get points? Okay, feel free to answer. I'll tell you where I would get points. I'd get points in cardiomyopathies. I would get points in shock because there's only a couple shocks, right? Cardiogenic, hypovolemic. I would get points in arrhythmias. I would get points in restrictive cardiomyopathy, dilated cardiomyopathy. I would get points perhaps in microbiology because there's questions dealing with rheumatic fever and issues with, let's say, effective endocarditis. I would get points on pharmacology, like the different drugs. So you see, instead of trying to find everything like anatomy, embryology, and so on, I can categorize cardio and say, well, they're going to give me location of the heart murmurs, right? They're going to tell me maybe systolic versus diastolic. Okay. They'll tell me S1 versus S2. They might say, well, certain maneuvers cause certain things to happen in the murmurs, intensify or minimize the sound, right? Okay, this is awesome. So if you're with me for a while, you realize location, age, these kind of factors help you. Remember brain tumors? If you've done with me before brain tumors, it's easy. In the neuro section, you have age and location. So if the location is above the 10th versus below, you know what tumors you're talking about. In the age, there's adult tumors and pediatric tumors. Okay, same to the heart. There's location. So let me show you something because I love my first aid. Why not? First aid is awesome. Now, if you like first aid, you should use it. But here's what happens. And don't forget, I've been in your shoes. I've been in med school. I studied my ass off with this stuff. I can promise you the stuff that I teach you, the stuff that I tell you to do is the stuff that I should have done, which I didn't do. We memorize and memorize and memorize. And what happens later is we forget everything. So please don't memorize unless you really, really have to, right? Let me show you something. Here's my first aid. Check this out. You see how easy this is if you have a location? Of course, this is awesome. Why? Because they're going to give you a location. They're going to tell you some right side versus left side. They're going to tell you something with systolic versus diastolic. They might say holosystolic, right? They might say something like that. So if they tell you location, the murmur was heard here. And perhaps they might tell you something that increases with maneuver or decreases with maneuver, like the murmurs. If you know some of these, you know them all. So the difficult part is we don't know which ones are diastolic versus systolic sometimes. And we don't know that if there's any kind of radiation to the carotids, they'll say the murmur radius to the carotids. this aortic, probably systolic murmur. It's probably aortic stenosis. So you see, instead of just memorizing, you go through and understand. This chart, table, whatever you want to call it here, this section here is something of very, very importance or important to me. And I would suggest strongly for you to understand the preload and afterload. If you don't get it, this warrants you to watch a video in whatever collection you own or you possess now that's going to help you understand the physiology behind it. The more you understand about the physio, I will guarantee this will fall into place with heart, with lungs, and kidney. Do you know why I do CPR? Not on a patient, but with you guys. Cardio, pulmonary, renal. Why? Because they all flow together. If you understand heart, you'll understand the lungs. If you understand the lungs, you'll understand the kidney. Plus, all the questions kind of mingle together. Just being honest, right? So I show you today techniques and ways to master your content so you can pass the test. You should be able to tell me about MVP, about VSDs, about all these different murmurs. Do not worry about the sounds of these murmurs. Please don't lose time listening to murmurs. You might say, what do you mean, Dr. Stavros? All my friends take these tests and they said, you need to know the murmurs. Guys, you're not cardiologists yet, all right? Out of the whole stupid test, you might get one or two questions with a sound bite. 50% of that, meaning one, you'll be able to answer it easily because of the question stem. The other one, all right, it's either going to be AFib, A-flutter, maybe like S3 versus S4, Kentucky versus Tennessee, right? Listen to, it's not going to be Wolf Parkinson White. It's not going to be something crazy and exotic. You need to hear hundreds, if not thousands of parts to kind of get decent, right? To kind of become decent. So play the game. Yes. So before we begin, when I go through this stuff, I want to show you when I do questions, don't just read this and memorize. Trust me on this, please. Try to go through most of the content like I show you. For example, the pathologies are big because you'll get questions on tetralogy of Fallot. You get questions on, PTAs, persistent trachysoteriosis. You get questions on this. Do you know how to differentiate, for example, tetralogy of Fallot? Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, we're human. We always make mistakes. When I was a student, I was so confident in being familiar with things that I jumped over things. I'm like, I know this. Tetralogy, I know. Then I get a question, get it wrong. Why? Because either A, I was familiar with it, but I didn't know the details, or B, I knew the details, but I never actually reviewed because I'm like, I know the details. So for every time that tetralogy came across my radar, I was like, yeah, I know it. If I only spent 2 minutes reviewing every time I saw tetralogy of Fallot, which would only be like 20, 30 seconds, maybe a minute, I'd be able to have so much reinforcement that by the time I did the questions later, I'd be good to go. So I plead you, and I really hope you take this into consideration. Being familiar with something doesn't mean you know it. Okay, I'm being honest. I'm the first to admit, when I was a student, I was very familiar with things, but I wasn't reinforcing stuff. I wasn't reviewing as much. And the biggest killer, the biggest reason why people fail this test is they don't review enough. That's it. So you need help. I've helped you. I can help you. I can provide you my advice. My advice, review every day as much as you can. Once in the morning, once in the evening, once in the morning, every morning, or once every other day, maybe Saturday, maybe Sunday, do something. You have to review. Okay? Good. So this is cardio. I want to do some questions with you. I use Amboss because with Amboss, I can show you ways to maneuver through these questions. And then I can show you other things as far as they have the beautiful glossary and articles. And I can share you the questions. So some of you have shared questions.